I'm Jay Horwitz, and welcome to the Mets Amazing Alumni Podcast. Right, let's go back April 1st, 1982. You and Walt Terrell traded for really the Derek Jeter before Derek Jeter. Lee Mazzilli. A lot of people don't realize Lee Mazzilli was an icon in New York, good-looking guy, a man about town. How much pressure was it on you to be traded for somebody like that?
A local kid, right? I didn't know that much about Lee. The first time I ever heard of Lee Mazzilli was in '79 in the All-Star game when he had that fantastic game. Hit a home run down the left field line, left-handed. I was like, who is this guy? And I remember his uniform being extremely tight.
Right.
I said, this guy has the greatest uniform I've ever seen.
He's like Fonzie.
It was amazing. But I do remember a couple of things from that day, and one was Lee kind of knew he was going to be traded, and once he had found he had been traded for Walt Terrell and I, the famous words, he said, I can't believe I'm getting traded for 2 minor leaguers. I remember that line.
I do too.
And Lee and I happen to be great friends now, so I always kid him about it.
And he was a teammate in 1986.
And a teammate in 86 and beyond, and a great friend for life now.
Yeah.
But on my end of that deal is that morning I had been called into Don Zimmer's office. I was with the Texas Rangers, and I had a really good spring training, and he called me in and he said, Ron, this is what we're going to do. We're going to send you to Oklahoma City. You're going to make 3 starts, and on your 4th start, you're going to be called to the major leagues. You're going to pitch in Texas against the Minnesota Twins or some team, whatever. And so I was going, as soon as he sent me down, I was driving to Plant City, which is 4 hours from the Texas Rangers training camp in Pompano Beach. And by the time I'd gotten to Plant City, the New York Mets had traded for me. And the next day, or I don't think it was later that day, the next day, it was the first time you and I met.
Right.
On the steps of Huggins Stengel
Field.
And you said, hey, we're going to have a few people that want to talk to you. And I saw the most people I'd ever seen in my life coming my way, and I was scared to death.
Yeah. But jump ahead to the present day, right? He's a former pitcher, a great pitcher. What do you make of Jacob deGrom, what he's done? It's like he's almost a robot. You pitch with Dwight. Is there any comparisons between the two, where different kind of pitchers?
Well, there was definitely a magnetism about Dwight. I think that we fall in love with teenagers who can beat older men, and I think that was one of the attractions of Dwight, who was 19 years old. Jacob came up a little later in his career, but they share the same fluidity, athleticism, tear your heart out kind of competitive nature, and consistency. Dwight, through those first 2 years in 84 and 85, he made a lot of teams look like little leaguers, and I think the same can be said of Jacob deGrom. Jacob deGrom was a former shortstop, a great athlete who became a great pitcher. And I said this once in the broadcast because I used to be a shortstop who became a good pitcher for the New York Mets. And I always say kiddingly, but not that kiddingly, deGrom was having the kind of career. When I fell asleep on the pillow, that's the kind of career I wanted. That's how great he is. He's a dream, not only to watch as a fan, but as a broadcaster. I don't know. I haven't seen anyone more consistent over this long a period of time.
No, for sure. But it would be a shock if he doesn't win another Cy Young.
Shock to me. He has definitely done everything that you can do. Now, listen, Ryu, for 3/4 of the year, had it because he was having the season that deGrom had last year, but part of winning a Cy Young is being consistent over 6 months, and certainly Jacob has done that. It's only been 10 pitchers in the history of the game that have won back-to-back Cy Youngs. He'll be the 11th.
Well, your career, you said you're not, deGrom. I looked at some research, and with the Mets, you're almost 30 games over 500. Mm-hmm. For career, 136 and 116. 6 straight years, double-figure wins. So you got to be proud of what you accomplished as a pitcher.
I'm so proud. There used to be at Shea Stadium, they would always put up the top 5 stats for the hitters and pitchers for the franchise. And I will tell you that occasionally I would, look up there and see Seaver, Kuzman, Gooden, Matlack, and I would always be 5th. Now, I certainly wouldn't be 5th now. I'd be 6th probably on that lineup because of Jacob. But it gives me great pride that I wore the uniform, and it gives me great pride that I was a really good pitcher for really good teams.
Right. When you got out of baseball, 95, 96, Did you think you would go right into broadcasting?
I didn't. In fact, Jay, most players are all the same. You get out of baseball because baseball kind of kicks you out. You're no good anymore. So there's this, I don't know, kind of mourning period where you don't really like the game because you think you might have been given the short end of the stick, or, boy, I still had some years in me. But what you really realize is that you just weren't that good anymore. That's just kind of happens like that. It's a young person's game. And then after you're out for 3 or 4 years, you start to turn on the World Series game, and you start to turn on a Friday night game, and you realize how much you love the game. And I know that I didn't want to get back in uniform. That wasn't like my dream. But I did want to be part of the game, and broadcasting was the perfect fit for me because I somehow, some way, I get to watch great athletes play this wonderful sport, and someone sends a check. I don't know where it comes from, but it's great.
So you started with Washington. So how did it get the SNY thing come about after, his 14th year this year?
I know, it's crazy, right? 2005, 2006, I don't know if it was December or January, I came in and had an interview with the SNY, which the Mets station, and I think there was 2 or 3 other people that were ahead of me. But what SNY really wanted to do is capture what Lindsey Nelson and Ralph Kiner and Bob Murphy had done before, and that's 3 names, 3 guys that did most of the games and really had that continuity for the broadcast. And I think the other guys that were ahead of me did not want to do that many games. I certainly did, and with Keith and Gary, it's been 14 of the greatest years of my life.
I mean, Keith was a teammate. Did you know Gary at all before you started?
I didn't. In fact, when Gary started full time was right around the time that I started to phase out of New York, and I was going to go someplace else. So I knew Gary was doing radio, but boy, I mean, how do you even think of Gary Cohen when Bob Murphy is still doing radio?
Right.
I mean, Bob was just such an iconic figure. So I knew him, but I didn't know him well. Keith and I were great friends when we played. We've become even better friends because we spent so much time together. And then being around Gary, there's 2 things that are great. I have a lot in common with Gary. We both went to Ivy League schools, and his excellence is as good as anyone who calls the game.
Do you have the roles divided up? I mean, you each have your own niche in the broadcast. I mean,
I wish, Jay. I have no idea what we're doing up there. I think that what we try to do is Gary tries to take the bolts, the nuts and bolts of the broadcast, and Keith does hitting and I do pitching, and that's kind of how we divide it up. But I grew up with a father who taught me how to play all facets of the game. Keith did too. So sometimes those things are very fluid. Keith loves talking about pitching. I love talking about hitting. So we have fun with it. And then with Gary's direction, kind of the rudder of the ship, we try to stay on point.
And Keith really, I'm with Keith a long time. He really hasn't changed much at all. I mean, he's Keith.
Keith, the only thing that has changed for Keith is when Keith, and you and I knew him when he played, he was such an intense competitor that on game days, you didn't want to talk to him. He was just into the game. And now he's like, he has so much fun. Like he's not like he was as a player. I think we used to kiddingly think of him as a very kind of dark personality when he played. He's just the opposite now. He's like a fun-loving uncle. That's what he is.
Right, Ronnie. Players have an off season now. You really don't have an off season. You go TBS, MLB Network. I know you do stuff on FAN. Is it hard to keep going all year round? I mean, you really don't get much of a break. Like a player do, you keep going another month or 2 and
yeah, just like I think some players now are working out 12 months a year. Baseball has become a 12-month kind of job. The same with NFL and NBA and all those things. No, I love it, Jay, and I think it's important for my broadcast because when I'm at MLB in the winter, I'm talking about the Minnesota Twins' top 10 prospects. I would never know that in the winter unless I did those shows. So I think it makes me more well-rounded as a broadcaster, and I can bring, to an SNY Mets broadcast some things that even shocking from the DH American League. I can bring some facts and figures from there. So to me, I think it makes me a more well-rounded broadcaster.
A lot of extra study, where you have to keep up. And
yeah, I mean it's fun though. It's like being in school and not getting any grades. It's really other than maybe the guys that write about the media guys in the Post and the News. But usually there aren't any grades, and it's just I don't know. I love it.
Go back to Yale for a second. May of 1981, you against Frank Viola, a future teammate. 11 innings, no hit ball. Still, I think the longest no-hitter in NCAA history. You lose the game on a double steal.
Yeah. Well, it was kind of funny. Like I think of my life, and the game that I'm most famous for is a game I lost in college, 1-0. But the greatest thing about it is I got a lifelong friendship with Frank Viola. I've loved that guy forever. And the one thing I remember, and I think it's the classiest thing I've ever saw done personally for me on a field, and that was after I gave up the hit to Steve Scaffa in the top of the 12th. The entire St. John's team stood in the top of the step of the dugout and clapped. Yes. And I always thought that was one of the classiest moves from a classy university.
I know when you're not doing baseball, I know you're an avid reader. History, what's your favorite books did you read?
Well, any books that you're giving me, Jay.
Yeah.
I mean, those are usually my favorite books. But no, I'm just a voracious reader. I always have been since I was a kid. I read not only fiction, but I think history is the thing I like to read about the most. And autobiographies seem to be the way I like to go. I want to find out what makes great people tick, because that's what we're aspiring to be as our best version of ourselves.
I know in 2009 you started a foundation in honor of your son Jordan with juvenile diabetes, and I spoke to Donnie LaPellis. It's interesting to think you kind of branched out. You kind of like to personalize what you do instead of giving gifts to organizations per se. That you did it after Sandy. You found families who lost a lot.
Yeah, I think when you start a foundation, you definitely have a goal in mind because that's your purpose. And when my son Jordan got diabetes, I was thinking, what can I do? I mean, somehow I've got to figure out a cure for him so he doesn't have this for his entire life. Half of our money goes to research for diabetes. But I found the other half, because I've been given so much in New York, I wanted to give back to the people that are in New York. And the best thing I think we've ever done, and we've done 100 things, but the best thing we ever did is after Hurricane Sandy, Bob's Discount Furniture worked with us, and we were able to give these credit cards for $5,000 in furniture for the people that lost their homes.
Great.
And to me, having families and having the kids crying, I mean, I got emotional. It was crazy, but to be able to, people that rebuilt their house, to put furniture in it, I don't know. It seems so simple and so surreal.
I might get emotional when we say you're going to kill me. I'm going to say, when Shannon Ford passed away, you did everything possible, raise money, go to dinners, went to her field. People should know what a big heart you have, and her family has never forgotten you, and you just did tremendous things for her, and I'll never forget the stuff that you did for her.
Well, you know, Shannon, it's kind of funny. I knew Shannon the least because I didn't know her as a player. I'm too old. And I knew her as a broadcaster, and I just will tell you that every single second I saw her, before she was sick, while she was sick, when she was the most sick, she made you feel better. And there's not many people that make you feel like that. And, we know she's in heaven, and we just tried to make sure that the people that are still left here, her children and her husband, have things a little easier until it's their day to see her again.
My last question, you had a health thing this year with thyroid cancer. How are you feeling right now?
I feel good. My stamina's not great. My voice is not great. But I got a couple more things I have to do. But I'm thinking by Christmas, I should be 100%, knock on wood. And, a lot of people have it worse than I do. This was my health challenge time. And but I'm going to be good, Jay.
Yeah. Thank you for being a friend all these years.
You're the best,
Thanks,
Jay. You're
man.
the best.
Appreciate it. Thanks.